what was your formative years in Troy like? And then at which point did you really realize that, you kind of like drinking a lot?
My formative years, I mean, I would say that it was kind of a part of the culture. Like, again, I always remembered I played Pop Warner football, South Troy Pop Warner. The very
Yeah.
first year they had a Pop Warner national championship, believe it or not, South Troy actually won it.
Wow.
So that was kind of a big thing. I just remember Sundays being a big thing that we played our games. And then afterwards we had team parties, at bars, or, I mean, just seemed like that, like the kids' birthday parties were always well attended. There was probably always a keg kind of going on there. And
yeah,
I would say that I started drinking in middle school, where, kind of found our way, like, the kind of became one of those things of that, like parents, raiding a parent's liquor cabinet at a friend's house, and kind of, being in that, like, exclusive club, as we looked at it at the time. There was that whole impressionable thing of hanging out with older kids and doing bad things, that rebellious phase. I was always a really, really good kid. My formative years, I was accelerated in school. And it always was something that it came easy to me. It wasn't through hard work. And I really didn't like the pressure that was associated with that. I always kind of looked at myself as being social. And, I kind of found that little outlet there. And then, it's one of those things I even think back about it now. Before I was prepping for this interview, I was kind of saying, the very first time I got drunk, or that I can really remember, was this time going over to a girl's house where we raided the parents' liquor cabinet. Didn't know what we were doing. I mean, literally mixing different types of liquor and drinking them that way. And, pretending like we didn't hate the taste of it when we in fact did. And, skunk beer, whatever the hell we had our hands on. And I remember throwing up the next day, but I didn't get caught. So then it was like the next day when I woke
Big
up.
deal. Exactly.
That was so much fun. And, now it's like you get that kind of like that little bad boy stigma kind of going with it. And I kind of became, just throughout high school, I was always a hard partying guy. I played lacrosse was the sport I played. That kind of always had the association with partying. And realistically at the time, I mean, I graduated high school in the class of 2003. And I feel like at that time, like we were kind of post that Animal House phase where like it had been glamorized, that kind of lifestyle, the frat boy image, which is kind of what I then went on to, college into being. And I would always go through these phases of, I would keep myself in check, where I was good about bullshitting people around me. And I was also good about bullshitting myself as to really how hard it was, because like, it didn't make sense to me, people that didn't want to drink and get blackout drunk. Like, to me, like that made all the sense in the world. That was what I worked hard for. It was priority number one. And like people that didn't do stuff like that, they just didn't make any sense to me. I'm like, what's wrong with these people? They're not fun, kind of deal. And as that life, because you could always find people to a certain age, but I, as I started getting older, I started finding myself that, I stayed living in a college town. So I kind of had that young blood, but eventually I started finding myself that, I'm becoming that guy that I used to make fun of when I was younger a little bit, or it's getting tougher to explain my behavior, or there's not as many people that are willing to go along for the ride. And it kind of just, COVID started making things spiral out of control a little bit.
Yeah.
But really, it started getting into the point where my nights started bleeding into my days, and it started becoming kind of an around-the-clock thing where I got to being in a functional kind of state, and it was almost like a double life to an extent. And people knew that I drank, but because I let you know that I drank, you didn't know to the extent that it was, kind of thing. And I was kind of, maybe I wasn't as good as I thought I was, but I feel like I was pretty good about keeping people off the scent of me. But it started getting to a point of where I did not have control over when I would stop drinking in a night. I mean, realistically, the only thing that would stop me was that I couldn't get my hands on more. It kind of seemed like I lived down the road from a gas station, and, you'd start making that second and third trip to grab the last, what you're going to consume that night. And
right.
And that's the thing too, is that for the most part, I mean, I always kind of hid behind the guise of that I was social. I would hang out at the bar, and I would have days that I would hang out at the bar where I wouldn't drink, or I wouldn't get drink to excess or whatever. But after COVID, we stopped having that mingling atmosphere that we had out and about, and being a bar regular. And also I moved back to my hometown, where I just became another guy. I lived in this small town, or this small city. Rochester, New York was where I lived during the worst of my years, I would say. And, over a period of time, I couldn't really go into a bar. It seemed like I was, I joke around, said I was a D-list celebrity in the town, because it just seemed like no matter what, if I went into a bar, eventually I made friends or made connections with somebody through somebody, or I drank with somebody that you knew, or knew a bartender that you knew, or just kind of had that way. And then eventually got out of town, and I just kind of started spiraling out of control. And then I had a point where I started getting the concerns of people. I started kind of knowing that friends were were worried about me. And I just kind of looked at it as that I had to do things under my own terms. I couldn't do them because other people wanted me to stop, kind of thing. And I was, on such a bender that I was on. I was worried that stopping was going to be, damaging. That's kind of that's where Detox came in. And like I said, I found myself in there. And when I checked in, I had a 0.28 BAC, I believe, or so. But
I think I was in that neighborhood. And that's interesting. You mentioned about stopping, because I had considered. I knew I was drinking a bit, right? COVID, great point, right? COVID being basically caught inside and not being able to get out and about and go to the different properties that I was associated with really changed the whole way that I looked at the world. And you just didn't know what to do. You were hamstrung. But that really started creating an issue with me with drinking, right? But I talked to some people about it and really was very interested in kind of hanging up the beer goggles. But when I was told sort of what the detoxing would be like and what possibly could happen with seizures